Accountancy from Walsh College. Randy is also dedicated to serving the community and is actively involved in an auxiliary police officer for the city of Hazel Park and a volunteer firefighter for the city of Troy. What an amazing, amazing person. Put your hands together for Randy. Thank you for joining us today. Anton Babushkin, Dr. Babushkin, is the founder and director of Troy Psychotherapy Outpatient Clinic. The doctor is the owner and director of the Troy Psychotherapy Outpatient Clinic and is on the clinical faculty of Wayne State University School of Social Work. He has more than 10 years of experience helping people develop skills for more productive and meaningful lives. He teaches at Wayne State University's School of Social Work and consults and presents at various area businesses and organizations. By the way, his specialized training through the Michigan Psychoanalytic Institute allows him to help people from various backgrounds, students, academics, business professionals, people in the medical field. Put your hands together for Anton, ladies and gentlemen. And we also have Michael Taylor, the second partner and creative director, SS Digital Media. And as the partner there at that media company, he specializes in developing marketing strategies that drive highly qualified web engagement for its clients. Michael leads the creative team and the marketing-first approach to web development and campaign design. A native of Florida, he attended the School of Music at Wayne State University and has previous tenure in product development for Sony Music and new audience development at the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. Put your hands together for Michael as well. All right, so we're going to begin with Randy. Randy, when you take a look at our discussion that we just had, what would you like Gen X, Gen Y, and the baby boomers to know about millennials? Because we saw that stat up there. It was one negative stat, but there's so many great things about millennials. What are some things that you feel are misunderstood or perhaps not reported widely about?
Right, that's exactly right. What I'd like the other generations to know about the millennial generation is that we're not all the same. A lot of times the term millennial is used as a derogatory term, like, oh, the millennials, it's their fault for X, Y, or Z. But we're not all the same. We're all very dynamic and different, diverse individuals. I'm considered a millennial, but I don't even have a Twitter account. I was at an event last night with a couple baby boomers at my table, and they were texting and Twittering and Facebooking, and I was trying to be polite and not be on my phone. So they were acting more millennial than I was. So it would be that we're not all the same. That would be the common misconception that I see the most, is that all millennials are the same, and they group us all together, as a lot of people do with most stereotypes. So that would be the one thing.
I love that. You know, my wife is a psychotherapist herself, and she's telling me recently, someone said something about millennials at a dinner party, and she's like, isn't it crazy that you guys are accusing millennials of this, when in her experience, millennials are some of the most creative, entrepreneurial, open-minded people that she's met, and yet these baby boomers are running around saying, those millennials, you know? So very good point. I'm glad you had a chance to say that. Dr. Anton, and say your last name for me, please.
Babushkin.
I thought I said it correctly, and I wanted to make sure. Dr. Babushkin, you're the founder and director of the Troy Psychotherapy Outpatient Clinic. We're talking about psychotherapy, so we'll get back to Michael in a second here. I wanted to ask you, in terms of what you've seen of millennials, the same thing?
I really like what you said, Randy. I agree. I think that it's easy to group people into one category, but I guess what else I would add is, we want to remember that millennials are young people, and young people need help to grow up. So when you think about people who are misbehaving, if they're millennials, it's because they're really young. I mean, I'm 34 years old, so I'm not exactly super senior myself, but most millennials are in their early 20s, or let's say maybe they're 18 or 25. They need a lot of mentorship. And so I think that's why they get a bad rep. They say, oh, these millennials don't know what they're doing. Of course they don't know what they're doing, because they're starting their careers and they look to us or to people who are more experienced for mentorship and guidance. Some people are not open to it, just like at any age group, but many of them I think are looking for somebody who's more experienced to say, what can I learn from you? So that's, I think, a big part of that's not really addressed. That it's like if you were to say to a 5-year-old, hey, how come you don't know how to cook? I'm 5, I don't understand the question. You know,
well, that's a great point. And we wouldn't want the 5-year-old to cook for us, even if you did, right? Michael Taylor, you're someone who a lot of people can learn from. You know, Sony, product development, I mean, some tenure there, but it's incredible. Your background is so diverse. What is it that you'd say, you know, that you could teach people about how you became a leader in your own profession?
risk. I think the jumping off the cliff, sight unseen, having confidence in the passion that you have, and then putting in the work ethic behind it. There is, to Randy's point, I think there is a misconception that millennials don't have a work ethic, and I think that's misplaced, but it's unguided a lot of times. So I was fortunate that I had mentors who were able to kind of right my wrongs and keep me on a straight path, help me make quality decisions when I messed up, help me find my way back. And so that really kind of prepared me to make qualified decisions and then not be scared of taking chances. Coming from Florida, I get asked often, why did you move to Michigan? And so, still trying to figure that out.
The sunshine, of course.
Right. But it was interesting because I spent some time in Nashville. I was originally going to move there. I decided to move to Detroit, knowing no one, sight unseen, and it really turned out to be a pivotal moment for me. And so I think taking those types of chances to find your way really has huge benefit. And a lot of times millennials are guilty of taking chances sight unseen without counting the cost. And so to really have that system of mentors around us who can help us vet or be a sounding board for decisions that we're considering makes all the difference.
It makes a huge difference. And Wayne State is fortunate to have had you, and the city is glad to have you as well. We're all glad that you moved here from Florida. It takes, the brains from other towns to come into town to create our new reality, and Detroit really has kind of created that. Andrew, if you would, for a moment, talk about, disrupting that conversation about millennials, because I feel like a lot of millennials, because of this negative perception, they're having to defend themselves. That takes a lot of energy to sit here and have to defend yourself at a dinner party, defend yourself at a meeting, when in fact you should be using that energy to actually put your best foot forward. What would you suggest relative to that? I'll give you my mic. Oh, you have a mic.
Yeah. So, boy, I read an article the other day that talked about how the reason why millennials don't have any money is because they spend all their money on avocado toast. And I thought it was pretty weird. What I would ultimately say is that if you are providing value for others, you don't have to try to prove yourself to anyone. You can work very hard, and it doesn't matter how old you are. I think we oftentimes get stuck on age as being a number, right? And I was reading something about the Colonel, KFC. He started his business at 65 years old or something, and that was amazing to me. And CEOs nowadays are really hitting their stride at between 35 and 40 years old. So it's never too late, but it's great to have that that head start. And as we're thinking about disruption, the earlier the better.
And that's why, start early, and that's really, really important. The one advice I always give, and you're not going into television, but I think it applies everywhere, is with these interns who come in, and I love what Andrew talked about, people waiting to get experience, and it's crazy to me that people wait to get experience. I always tell people, if you really want to do something, go work in the field now, even if it's volunteering. And so I volunteered. On the way here, I passed by at City Hall in Troy, the cable station in Troy. And all my friends in college would be like, do you get paid to do that cable show in Troy? And I'm like, no. But you get paid in that way that can never be paid back. I mean, it's incredible. But as you guys take a look at your success, and the reason you're on this panel is because you have proven your success. You are a leader. When you take a look at what were the keys to becoming a leader, to becoming successful, if you could sum it up in a few words, where would you begin? And Randy, we'll start with you.
Sure. I feel like being successful for me has been being open and honest with my supervisors with exactly what I wanted to do in my career. I get involved with a lot of different volunteer organizations. As we've mentioned, I'm a volunteer police officer and a volunteer firefighter. I don't get paid for any of those, but I've learned a lot. People ask me, oh, do you get paid for those? No, but I get paid in experience. And the connections that I make through those organizations, I meet people that help me meet other people that have led me where I am today. As far as getting in the role and the position that I'm in today, I started my career in accounting as a bookkeeper in corporate accounting, but I went to school for forensic accounting is what I wanted to do. I was very intentional on exactly where I wanted my career to go. I started as a bookkeeper. I made my intentions known to my supervisor. He knew I did not want to end my career in corporate accounting. So I was open and honest with him, and he accepted that. He was the first manager that I ever had that put my personal development above my commitment to the firm where I was working, and he actually helped me land my first forensic accounting position. I worked at UHY Advisors for my first forensic accounting position. And if I wasn't open and honest with him, and I was just like, oh, I'm just trying to get my accounting experience and, kind of keeping my agenda hidden, I don't think I would have been as successful in getting into the position I am now at Raymond.
Michael, what would you suggest is your key to success?
Maintain a posture of listening and learning. There is often there's a lot of talking that happens. We're quick to talk, quick to give an opinion, and I was fortunate to have parents who made me be quiet. I was much more of a talker when I was younger than I am now, sometimes to a fault, but it really, I think, has allowed me to be that much more thoughtful in my responses. And so usually when you listen to someone, they identify where they are, and so then you can respond appropriately. And the background that I've had, that I've experienced, has really provided opportunities through listening. If you would have told me 15 years ago that I would end up living in Troy, Michigan, I would have asked you, where is that? And so before moving to Detroit, leaving Detroit, moving to Nashville, moving to LA, I really did not have a roadmap, but because I was in a posture of listening and being prepared to accept an opportunity that was put before me, it really allowed me to appreciate that trait. And so we practice at our agency really a posture of listening. Let's put the phones down, let's close the laptops. How do we really make sure that we're paying attention to each other? And it's really been a huge benefit to not only our team, but to those we work with.
You're talking to a guy with an iPhone on a kickstand on a podium. Very nice. I was actually looking at some of your tweets as well, by the way. But I love what you said about listening. It's interesting. I visited India 2 years ago as an adult. I've been there like 2 other times because my family still has family there. And I found what you just said as a huge epiphany I had when I was there. Did you know when you talk to people in India and you say something, the gap between when they respond is actually longer? Like, so if you talk to someone in India, you say, hey man, how did you end up doing that? They kind of go, and then they like repeat the question back to you. And I kid you not, I found this all through India. And I was like, wow. So I came home and asked my parents, I was like, what is that? And I said, and my dad explained to me, and he worked at GM and corporate for 26 years. He's like, he had the same issue. And he says, in America, we're uncomfortable with silence. Silence makes us uncomfortable. In India, in the Eastern culture, silence is actually a time for reflection and meditation in the culture. So even in a conversation, there's room for that and space for that. And if we all just created a little bit more of that, it would be awkward television though. Good evening, our top story today has to do with, but certainly you give us room for reflection and for thought, so thank you for that. Dr. Anton?
I like what the other panelists said. I think those are both very nice points. What I would add, I guess, is I think it's important to accept losses along the way, kind of mistakes. Like, I started out freshman year in college studying computer science, which turned out to be a really big, amazing industry that I didn't know about at the time. And I graduated with a degree in environmental science from Michigan, but I don't do anything related to that now, except for try to support environmental causes. But I think along the way, what I've tried to do is try to figure out when am I not making progress? When have I kind of reached the end of this doesn't make sense to me, or it doesn't work, or I'm not getting the results I want? Be able to kind of accept those losses and move on. You know what I mean? Not kind of stay too long. I think that's one of the things that I try to do is try to say, okay, I gave this 6 months or a year or several years. how far have I gotten, and should I keep going or maybe change directions? I think that's a very important thing that everybody does, but it's a life lesson that I think can be applied to work or your personal life, where it's important to both stick it out and be persistent and not wait around too long if something's really not working. So that's what I try to do.
Andrew, let me ask you about that, because that seems like a tough one. Someone's working a job or a project or freelancing, and they sit back and they say, okay, I'm looking for success, right? So I'm gonna wait for success. But then I wait and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm still in the incubation period. And then I continue to wait. When is that time? And I know it's different for everybody, but is there a sign or a signal that we should look for in terms of our success and whether or not it's actually taking?
I think about the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I watched that True Hollywood Stories, and they were on tour for like over 10 years, I think, before they actually started to become successful. And so I think it's that persistence piece. If you have balance and peace in your life where you're able to do what you really enjoy doing, being able to pay your bills and spend time with your family, I think that success is defined differently from each person. And there's this sort of, I won't get into the long story about it, but there's this story about these individuals who are ultimately looking for success, and they go on this long journey trying to find success, and it was actually from like not too far from where they really started, when it comes full circle on that. So I think that success is defined differently, but having balance in life is key.
Very, very good answers there. I just wanted to share with you, I started in TV and I made $20,000 a year, and as an Indian American going into television, my parents were supportive, but my family friends were not. And so a lot of relatives, they still to this day are like, so you're a DJ? I'm like, no, I'm not. But it's fascinating to me. But one thing that I used to sit back and my parents would say, well, you're making $20,000 a year, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and I was still making $20,000 a year, and I was anchoring the weekend news in Flint. And my mom and dad were like, when will you not make $20,000 a year again and not live here anymore? Like where I was living in Troy with my parents, and I was like 22, 23, and I was like, I'm gonna live here until I get a break. And it was really hard for me to figure out when that time would be. Like maybe all these Indian people were right, and I'm sorry to use such a broad term, but it's true. I mean, the Indian community of my parents' generation are quite myopic when it comes to careers, and it's because of where they came from, right? It's not a personal conviction, but it just seems like I was like, maybe they're right. Maybe I should get out of this and go into medicine or engineering like all my cousins and brothers. But yeah, it's like if you wait and you find a way to get paid for something you love to do, you hope it pays off. It paid off for the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Jury's still out for me, so we'll figure that out. So advice for the next generation. This is an interesting one. We have millennials here. We have people who are, I think, baby boomers, and some others in between. I'm 41. I want to learn from millennials because there's something that they're doing correctly and right that I can learn from. So I'm going to begin with you, Randy. What's something that I, as a 41-year-old dude, can learn from you when you see my generation?
Oh, that's a tough question. I would say the baby boomer generation and Generation X could learn from millennials that we do things differently. The biggest difference that I see between baby boomers and millennials, and the biggest argument that I see, even in my own workspace, is the working hours. I feel like the baby boomers are very much 9 to 5, you need to sit in this box, and this is when like normal people are most productive. But with technology changes, and especially in the accounting industry, with we can take our work anywhere. Sometimes baby boomers don't understand the flexible work schedule, the working remotely, and they're like, no, if I don't see you working in that office from 9 to 5, you're not working. And our generation is like, well, of course, I mean, yeah, I am working, I have a computer, I can do the same things at home, or sometimes I work from the fire station. I can do the same things I'm doing remotely that I can do in the office. And we are still being productive, and we're more efficient with technology nowadays that sometimes we're more productive when we work from home and we can do those side gigs and have a more flexible schedule. And I'm more productive. I'm not a morning person, so it's hard for me to get here this morning. But I'm more productive between the hours of 10 and 6. A baby boomer, they're so used to that, waking up at 5 in the morning and, 9 to 5 is when they're most productive. But our generation, I think we're all productive at different times, and there needs to be that flexibility there for us to be the most creative and most productive that we can be during the workday. So that would be the biggest thing I think that the baby boomers generation and Generation X should know about the millennials.
So breaking that paradigm of what has to work is when I see you in the office. That's actually very interesting, those hours. Anton, Michael, Andrew, anyone else want to chime in on that one right away? Is there something that stuck out to you about what she said that you agree with, you want to expand on?
I think Anton hit on it earlier. There's equal responsibility from the older generation to tutor and mentor the younger generation. There is, as a kid, I wanted a drum set. My parents never bought me a drum set. I would sneak up to our church and practice. And every Christmas, what do you want for Christmas? I want a drum set. Never got it. And then in church, my parents heard me playing drums. You know, that's my son. He's pretty good. And there was a moment when it kind of clicked for my dad that, okay, this kid really wants to embrace music. How do we foster that? My dad was a banker, wore a white shirt, tie every day. I was anti-ties, hence the bow tie and chucks. If I have to wear them, I chose to do it my way. But I think that responsibility of our older generation to really foster and to guide younger generations, and to have a level of empathy, to accept that the way that it's done now is not the way that they've done it, but there is opportunity for both sides to really grasp nuggets from that, and I think that is really a missing link between the understanding of some of the work ethic or the stigma of what it is to be a millennial versus what it is to be a baby boomer. And so that's where I've seen both the opportunity and the reward when you see that working correctly.
And that, Anton, would you say that begins by taking out the ridicule? Because I feel like there's this attitude of ridicule on both ends. Like we make fun of baby boomers maybe, and the baby boomers are making fun of. We got to take that out, right?
Definitely. I mean, I think ridicule usually comes from a lack of understanding. You know what I mean? Or lack of knowing somebody, or lack of spending time with them. I think in our society, we move fast, we drive, we're not around each other as much. Like even this meeting, most of the people in this group, we might not see each other again. Even though we have a nice group here, we could all learn through these kind of conversations. But I don't think we do that enough as a society, so we don't kind of know each other. We might say, oh, that's that group over there, this is the group over here. So I think that's an important barrier. And I think to your point, Michael, I think part of the challenge is usually millennials work best when they're working in teams. For example, let's say Mark Zuckerberg, right? Smart guy, obviously creative, new ideas that weren't around 20 years ago. But without Sheryl Sandberg, who's a seasoned executive, I'm sure, or the other people who are involved, I'm sure Facebook wouldn't be as successful. So I think that's a really hard balance. How do you look to a millennial and say, wow, they're thinking about things that haven't been around before, but they need some kind of other expertise. Like think about Justin Bieber. Now, I don't necessarily listen to his music, but he became popular, and there's nothing wrong with his music, but not my taste maybe, but he became popular through YouTube videos, which wasn't even a platform, let's say in the 1990s. But without the expertise of the executive team that works with him, or the marketing, or whatever it is they do, he wouldn't be the Justin Bieber he is today. I think that's a very hard balance, to both believe in the younger generation in terms of what are the new things, and also to leverage what we already know. In other words, you don't want to throw out what's already existing and working, but you don't want to just stick to it and say we have to keep this going until the end of time. I think that's a really hard thing to do, and it's a case-by-case decision.
Andrew, I feel like maybe this conversation, if this was being had 40 years ago, would be similar. I feel like the greatest generation called baby boomers lazy and hapless and insensitive. Am I wrong? I mean, the greatest generation also worked so hard that when they saw the way the next generation was working, it wasn't the same. And then they made fun of it. So baby boomers, I mean, my dad and mom, when they listened to Elvis in India, they were considered like degenerates. You know, like how could you listen to this awful musician? Really? And they would say, my mom didn't want to have an arranged marriage in 1974 in India. She wanted to see more than one picture of a guy that was being proposed to her. And she was considered to be, I don't want to use the word, it's my mom. But she was like, I want to meet the person who I'm going to marry. And they thought that was insane. They were like, why would you want to meet this person? Just marry the person. So that's changed. And then I ended up marrying outside of my race. I married someone who's white. And like my grandmother was like, is he okay? Like, what? So I feel like every generation is always like, I can't believe they're doing this, right? So, I mean, isn't that kind of the way it goes? Would you say, Andrew?
Absolutely. You know, kind of getting back to that mindset of the 40-hour work week, you know, that's really sort of a work week under ideal circumstances. We need to ask ourselves the question, how many hours during that week are we actually doing work? So, does anybody have any guesses on that when they start doing studies? Like, how much work is actually going on in a 40-hour work week?
Depends on where you are. Here at the office, there's lots of conversations and break time and say 25 hours if you're in the office.
That's actually a little bit on the high side. So they find that, you know, you're really only working maybe between 16 and 22 hours. I mean, some people maybe more, but you know, that's where like real work gets done. So having that remote work arrangement and being able to find that sort of Zen zone where you're getting optimal work done is key. And I think that, you know, when we look at how much time we're going to be able to spend with our kids, if we're able to kind of break out of that sort of what I would call the sort of the industrial revolution sort of mindset of, okay, we got our 8-hour days. Unions fought for that 8-hour day, by the way, because that was really the maximum amount of time that people could work without getting hurt and without burning themselves out. And I said, you know, with all of these advancements in automation and artificial intelligence, there may be a day where a lot of these tasks are going to be replaced by robots and automation. And so what does that mean? Does that mean a universal basic income? Does it mean that you know, we are working maybe 3 days a week and we're only working 6 hours a day because we have a lot of these types of technology that are replacing labor? And so we have to think about that and what the future of a work week may look like.
Very nice. We want to pick up the cards in the audience. You guys have some questions as well? You know, I had to switch from you guys. I grew up in Troy and we